started tonight. So first off, thank you all so much for joining us. We are here to walk you through our creating your plan, why take the SAT and how to prepare. And I am Maggie with Summit, and we have Kim joining us as well. All right. Don't worry, we're going to leave time for questions and answers at the end. You might want to grab a pen or pencil. There's lots to go over tonight, and we will save time for those questions at the end. So, like I started with, my name is Maggie Finn. I am the co-founder of Summit Academic Support. So I am a college admissions consultant along with my co-founder, Jacqueline Angel, who is also here in support tonight. You can wave, Jackie. And we are both high school teachers full-time in the classroom in addition to this work. So we really love working with kids all day, every day, and also after school when we meet with our clients. So we are members of the National Test Prep Association and the Independent Educational Consultants Association. Those are the fun acronyms at the bottom of my slide here.
And hi, everyone. I am Kim Strauch. I'm the founder and CEO of Sharp. So myself and another Dartmouth alum built the Sharp app for students to prep for the SAT in an effective and engaging way. Prior to doing Sharp, I was formerly a software engineer at tech companies like Apple and Airbnb. So I'm bringing my tech background to try to solve this problem of SAT prep. And I'm also a member of the NTPA, or National Test Prep Association, and am an expert on the digital SAT.
All right, so before we talk about testing, I wanted to be really clear about sort of our philosophy about how this all fits. So we firmly believe that test scores do not define a student. They are just one part of the whole puzzle in this college admissions process. And there's a lot else that's going on here. We've got coursework in your grades in that coursework. How rigorous of a course load are you taking? We have their writing. We work with students on the personal statement, the essays that they have to write, your activities, your recommendation letters. There are so many pieces to the college admissions puzzle, and the test scores are just one part. We also believe that test prep doesn't need to be expensive or extreme or drive you crazy. And that is why we are partnered here with Sharp tonight, because they have a really neat solution to this problem. But we also think that families can kind of come at two extremes, right? Spending a ton of money, a ton of time on it, or being so anxious about it because it is really overwhelming that they don't spend the time to set a really good plan. So our goal tonight is clarity for you in this process. We want to help families understand if testing is the right path for your student, when to test, and how to approach it effectively. So with this being our philosophy, we will go through the big picture from me, and we will have Kim go through this really great strategy using the Sharp app and all of their thinking that they've done there. And then we'll leave time at the end for questions and answers. So that's the plan for tonight. And then there is this piece of the reality check that while we don't think testing defines a student, we also think that most students should seriously consider testing. And there's a couple of reasons for that that we're going to go through tonight. So that can be true that it doesn't define students, but also you should seriously consider testing because we know for many students testing still matters because the most selective schools and those popular schools that are really blowing up right now, schools in the Southeast are really big, big state flagships are really big. They are returning to testing. So an example over here is the University of Alabama is returning to testing. Auburn is returning to testing, and there has been lots of discussion in return at some of these most popular and selective schools about making sure that students have an SAT or an ACT score to submit. Strong scores can also expand options for students and merit scholarship access, which is really exciting and really important. Speaking of, this is an example from Auburn, which you can see over here. They are returning to test required for the class of 2027. So access to guaranteed merit scholarships is often tagged to a score on a test. So this is straight from Auburn's website. You can see that this is a really simple grid. It is not how amazing of an essay did you write that might help you get you into the school. But once you are accepted, they are doing a grid, right? Where you are trying to say, what is your GPA? What ACT, or they also have a similar grid for SAT, and what is your estimated annual merit award. So that's really important to understand. Okay, if you're going test optional, are you choosing to go optional for potentially earning scholarships? Because that is something that is a huge piece of this puzzle that's really important for families to understand. The other piece that I wanted to talk about is that test optional can also secretly sort of mean that they are test preferred. So it might say test optional on the common data set or on the common app, and actually, it's a lot easier to get into a school if you have a test score that you can submit. So we have a colleague, Brian Eufinger at Edison Prep, who is a guru in this area of test optional might not just mean that. And he has pulled some really great data. Unfortunately, this data is from 2022 because when schools released this data, it caused a bunch of drama, and you will see why as I talk through the numbers. And so they don't do that anymore. But it is suffice it to say, it is likely that this is still the case, that a test score means it is way more likely that you are going to be accepted at some of these schools. So here's my little fun fill in the blank English teacher. If you submit a test score at blank, you are blank percent more likely to be admitted. So here are some crazy percentages. Auburn is 800%. So we can probably make this conclusion that it makes sense that they're returning to tests required. Auburn has found that it is worth it for them, and they see students be more successful when they are able to evaluate their students based on the test score that they have to submit. And this is not just huge schools in the South that have become so popular. Check out a bunch of think pieces, New York Times, Washington Post about those schools blowing up. Boston College, you are 270% more likely to be admitted. University of Virginia, 206% if you have a test score. Tufts, 150%. Amherst, 150%. And our California schools, where it is nice and much warmer than where I am in Vermont, the University of Southern California, 130% more likely. This doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have the top test score in these schools' test brackets to be able to get into the school. It just means the school wants confirmation that your strong grades, your strong recommendation letters, all of that aligns to performance. And the SAT has shown that data. Actually, some really great researchers out of Dartmouth, Kim and my alma mater, have found the ability of SATs to predict how successful you will be once you get to that campus. So, the most important thing that I really like to say to parents when I'm working with them in college consulting and to students is that the most important part about a test score is that I want to see students have a test score that represents their full potential because it opens doors for students. I do not want you to miss out on opportunities because you did not have a score because you didn't take the test. And I don't want you to miss out on opportunities because your test score might not represent your full potential. If you didn't prep or didn't spend like time to know what tests would be the best fit and when to take it, that would mean maybe there's some doors closed that could have been open to you otherwise. So that also means you don't necessarily have to submit the scores that you have. That we just need to have a test score that is an option. One of the things we do as college consultants is Jackie and I would meet with you and discuss whether you're going to submit the score that you have. But if you don't have a score, that decision is made for you, right? You don't have a choice. So we want test scores to be able to empower students to make decisions in their college list building and college search process. So when families ask us, when should my student take this SAT? How should they prep? That is probably questions you have tonight, which is hopefully why you are here, because we are going to answer them. We sort of based our testing strategy advice on two things. So the first is academic readiness. This one is not about how smart a student is. It's about whether they're academically ready to perform their best on the SAT. First off, most students are not ready to take the SAT before the end of sophomore year, and we will talk a little bit more about that. And then the second piece is college list and goals. So where are you aiming to go? What are you interested in your college search? We can look at that data and kind of have that as a piece to ground us in this process. So let's talk about this a little more. First one is academic readiness. So the test scores do not exist in a vacuum, right? There's so much data that you submit when you apply to college. They can see the classes that you've taken. They can see your AP scores if you're taking AP classes. They can see all of these pieces about who you are as a student. But A score is only meaningful in the context of where you're applying and what you want to do, right? If you're looking for a program that you're trying to get merit, you're trying to get into a direct admit nursing program, we want to know that you are academically ready to do that work, which is why the testing matters to know if you're academically ready to do your best. So, we look closely at whether schools are test required, test preferred, or strictly test optional. And those schools still do exist. But those labels don't always mean what they think that you might mean. So that is why we have that piece. This often means that we're using things like PSAT scores or we are using mock tests to make sure that we can see how are you doing? How far is that score from your goal score? And that's one of those pieces that we would work with you on, and also Kim's team at Sharp can really support you with. Our second piece is looking at the college list. So these things kind of come at the same time. As you're working on your SAT, you're building your college list, and we want to know what are you shooting for and what are your goals, and that will help us understand what your test plan looks like. So, as I mentioned, I am both a college consultant and a high school teacher. So, this is a fake client profile that you can see. We're calling our fake client my dog, Fitz, who is really, really cute, but definitely would not do very well on the SAT. So, we'll forgive him for that. And I'm showing this because I want you to be able to see that this is something that we sit down with families and take really seriously to make sure that you have all the information you need to navigate this testing world. So, we make decisions about building your college list and planning for what your college search is going to look like based on data. So, we have this spreadsheet that we work on with families. You can kind of see what I have here is I grew up in Connecticut, so our local state school, and then the three schools my brothers and I applied to. We can see the different testing policies. A lot of this is all here, but we will help dig into things we know as people informed in the college consulting community and who are talking with colleges and admissions officers. So, this is something that shows what the decision-making process looks like. As we're building your college list, you'd be looking at this, and you would see that we kind of want to see, is this going to help you get admitted, or is it something that we might not necessarily send the test score? The second piece is then we kind of put your score in context. So if this were Fitz's sheet, you can see your test score is up here. Let's say that he earned a 1500, very smart dog. You can go all the way down and kind of see how that compares to the schools on Fitz's list. We use this data all the time in conversations with our families, and we work closely with students to ensure that whether it's a 1450 or a 1500 or whatever they're shooting for, actually gets them into the schools they want by spending an industry-leading number of hours on applications and essay development with our students. As English teachers, Jackie and I spend a lot of time working with students on their writing, and that is kind of our secret sauce as college admissions consultants, that we provide everything you're looking for in the college admissions process, and then we add that extra expertise of really making sure that a student's story comes out once you have that foundational piece of a strong score, a strong academic record, lots of extracurriculars, all of those things to really make sure that your application stands out. Okay. So once you understand whether testing makes sense and why, which is something you might work with Summit on, the next question is how do you prepare effectively, right? How do you take that academic readiness and that college list and goals piece that you've worked on with us? And how do you make sure that you have a smart strategy to get there and to reach your goals? And that is what Sharp is doing. So before I shift over to Kim, who's going to walk you through some really awesome stuff that Sharp can do, I do want to say that I still tutor for the SAT English section, in addition to running our college consulting business. And my students use Sharp every week. Some of them, if they are diligent, are also using it every day, which always makes me excited. And I'm a huge, genuine fan of what they are doing because it's something that kids will actually use. And we all know that that is the first step, right? Like kids need to be using this. So I am super excited to have Kim here tonight.
Thanks so much, Maggie. Really excited to be here. And as you all probably have seen, Maggie is a fantastic college coach as well as an SAT tutor and teacher and all around human. So we're so thrilled to be here today with the Summit team. So I get a lot of questions about like what even is the SAT like today? If you took the SAT when you were in high school. I know when I took the SAT in high school, it was on a Scantron, like this image on the left here, and I filled in the bubbles. Well, since 2024, the SAT is no longer actually administered on paper. It is fully digital. So it's actually administered in this app here on the right called Blue Book, where students can use this on their laptop or on their tablet, and they take the actual official SAT here, and they take practice tests here as well. But that's something that I think some people who haven't taken the SAT in a while or stayed up to date in this space may not have realized that the SAT is fully digital. So beyond being just digital, the test is also adaptive. So what that means is that for each section, there's a reading, writing section and a math section, and these are each composed of two modules. So how a student does on the first module determines the level of difficulty of the second module. So there's always two versions of module two, and it's either easy or hard, and it depends on, how many questions essentially you get right on the first module. There is also a built-in calculator in the Blue Book app called Desmos. This is a graphing calculator that students may have used in other math courses in high school so far. But this calculator, learning about it, learning how to use it can be a huge unlock for students, both in saving time and solving. I think you can solve anywhere from 35 to 40% of the questions just by using this calculator. So it is really a game changer for students. So as Maggie said before, I don't think, and she doesn't think, that good SAT prep has to be extreme or expensive. For me, good SAT prep looks like something that is accessible so students can access it anytime and anywhere so they can get studying in hopefully every day, or at least every week for these tests. Just a few minutes at a time, anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, can really make a big difference. Also, SAT prep is really good when it's adaptive, so not one size fits all, meaning it adapts to the difficulty level of where your student is at and is not too easy or too hard. The last thing about good SAT prep is that it is affordable. SAT prep doesn't need to break the bank. College coaching and college itself can be very expensive, so this is not an area where I think parents need to be spending a ton of money in order to get the results that they want to see. So many of you are probably familiar with these prep books here on the left, things like Princeton Review, Kaplan, and Barron's. They are excellent resources, but they're very big, heavy, and they're not interactive. We built Sharp first and foremost to work really well on a phone or a tablet, but it also works in a browser, so students can use it on their computer as well. We have seen that many students like to take practice tests, but practice tests can be, 2.5 hours. And so with Sharp, you can actually just go in and do a few questions at a time and really make a big difference in learning and getting used to the kinds of questions that are asked on these exams. And so you can really learn a lot prior to test day while just putting in a little bit of prep at a time. We also have push notifications that remind students to practice, which can be really helpful. As a parent, you may not want to remind or politely nag your students to study for the SAT. That is okay. We will do it for you. So the push notifications are a really good way to remind students that, SAT practice is something that they should do. So just like the story of Goldilocks, we make sure that our questions in Sharp are not too easy, not too hard, but just right. We figure out where a student is at early on based on our diagnostic tests and any previous scores they share with us, and we continue to adapt the level of difficulty as they answer more questions in the app. And we make sure to surface certain skills and difficulty levels just at the right time for your student. We're also really experts on what's on this test, so we've trained our app as well to make sure we are showing students the highest leverage or biggest bang for their buck questions at the right time. So it's students who are less familiar with certain grammar rules, for example, if they review those and practice those kinds of questions, can really pick up quite a few points that, can be a gimme on the test. Now, this last piece is really near and dear to my heart, and it's a big reason that I decided to build Sharp in the first place. I wanted to make sure that all students could have access to an affordable prep option. And traditional test prep, like courses, can be very expensive. I've seen a bunch of courses online that cost over $2,000. And Sharp is really nice because you can actually start free and upgrade to our Pro plan for less than $18 a month. And so it's a really low cost option and a really good way to get started with SAT prep. Of course, students can upgrade. Like if a student needs more support, you can add on or layer on tutoring on top of Sharp, which can be really effective. So we have a number of students who work with tutors as well, which can be like the best way to use Sharp, and people get really great results that way. But I find that by not spending this money on test prep, you have this money or budget to be able to spend on other parts of the college admissions process, which can be really complex to navigate. And so that's where Sharp can really come in. So far, our students who are using the app are really enjoying it and seeing results in their scores. They love that they can do it on their phone and it can fit into their busy schedules after practice, after school, before extracurriculars. They love asking our built-in AI tutors for support when they get a question wrong, and they can get support right away. And we also have, as I mentioned, a number of students who are working with tutors on top of using Sharp and are seeing even better results by complementing that tutoring with Sharp. So it's not something where it has to be an either or, but both can work together well.
All right, and this was not planned, but I did come from 2 hours of SAT English tutoring directly before this, and I did not click off the Sharp Tutor dashboard the whole time for both of my students. So I had tutored before Sharp and spent way too much time clicking around and trying to have the most effective study plan for my students. And I love it. It's amazing. But I think the other thing that Kim's kind of talked about here is like it works for kids and kids really like it and they're going to do it because I'm seeing my students work on it a little bit every day because they're waiting for their sibling to be finished with baseball practice so then they can drive home. So I think it's really great and I just use it for 2 hours today and I'm a tutor. So there's my little endorsement.
So here's a rough timeline for how you can think about the overall college and testing process and what happens when. So like Maggie mentioned before, there's that academic readiness piece for testing. So we've definitely seen the best results for students starting to prep for the SAT either very late into or after completing Algebra 2. That's no accident because algebra is a big component of the math section on the SAT, and that's a big reason why we recommend students finish that before really getting into testing. But students can start SAT prep after finishing Algebra 2. They can do it in a very lightweight way using the Sharp app. They typically take the PSAT NMSQT, which is the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. I know it's really a mouthful, but that gets offered junior fall, I believe in October every year. And then during junior year, working on building out their college list, thinking about where they might want to go to school, what things are important to them, figuring out how to shape their story. That's when they might work with someone like Maggie or Jackie on the college process. And we definitely recommend that students finish testing, hopefully before senior year. The reason we recommend that is because senior year is crazy with AP exams, college applications. There's just so much happening that like it is so nice to have the SAT or ACT fully checked off your list before senior year begins. So we'll typically recommend that students try to take, let's say, an initial SAT sometime junior year and try to wrap up either in the spring or the summer prior to senior year.
All right, so we just gave you so much information, and it is a big, exciting process to think about what are your students' next steps? What are they going to do when they grow up, right? And this SAT and this college process is a way to get there. And that's why we like working with young people and working with teenagers because it's super exciting and they have so much potential. We would love to learn more about how we can support your goals. So we've got some information on the screen here. We got two QR codes. So you need to download the app. So if you have a phone, you should get out your phone right now and download the Sharp app. It is awesome. It almost makes me want to do the math portion of the SAT, which is saying something as a English and history teacher. So you can do that over on the left, get set up with Sharp, start for free, awesome. And then the app your kid will use and the coach your kid will be excited to see. So this link over on the right side is if you are interested in learning more about working with Summit. That is the link to our contact form, which will get you started. We do free consultation calls. We can schedule you. We can get on Zoom and hear more about what you're thinking about and how we can maybe support your family. So both of those links are going to stay up on the screen. Um, my assumption and why Kim and I are so excited to be on here tonight is we are guessing you have questions about this process and we would love to know them. So specifically, if you have questions about the SAT part of the process and how it fits into the overall college application journey, we would love it if you can type those questions out in the chat and we'll kind of switch off and answer them as we go. I'm wondering, Kim, I'm going to hit you with a question to start us off as some people
Yeah.
maybe start to type their questions. This is the one I get all the time, so I'm curious to hear what your answer is. What's a good score on the SAT, Kim?
What's a good score? Well, this is my favorite answer, which is true in software as well, which is it depends. Um, a good score really depends on your students' goals and what their target college list looks like. So as Maggie showed earlier in the slides, different schools will have different SAT, like 25th percentile to 75th percentile ranges published. And so I would say like what a good score is really depends on like the kinds of lists on the kinds of schools on your list and what the published ranges are for those schools. And I would say, yeah, a good score falls hopefully somewhere in that middle 50th percentile of the school range. But yeah, the thing that I think is really interesting and surprising that many people maybe don't realize is that a 1050 is actually the average score on the SAT. I think we see a lot of marketing and media about much higher scores, but that is actually the official national average.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that's really important to get out there is that the school, there is lots of stress around the SAT, but to kind of have a sense of what that national average is and how your student fits into that, to know that it's a lot of pressure to get into some of these really exciting schools that students are looking for, but kids are doing great and they're really able to show their knowledge on these tests, and that's what we're trying to support them to do. So I love that answer too. I'm would love to have more questions from people that are here. And if you're thinking things, go ahead and type them into the chat. We will answer them. But I have another good one, actually. Kim, do you want to pick a question to ask me? We'll see.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, Maggie, if my student is in the eighth or ninth grade, what should they do right now to prepare for the SAT?
All right, I know Jackie's on here and she's going to be so proud of this answer. If they are in middle school, and I hope there isn't anyone with elementary schoolers here because they can go play outside. But if your kid is in middle school, eighth, even ninth grade, the most important thing that you can do on the SAT for the SAT is to read a book. So I spend a lot of time tutoring for the SAT English section, and there are certain things that are just really, really hard for students to authentically know and learn. And some of that just counts as vocab, right? Like it's not going to feel great to have to memorize. There are lists of 1,000 words that are on the SAT, but memorizing that list is not going to be fun, and it's not necessarily going to then stick in your mind after when you have to perform on the test if you're just memorizing a bunch of words. So finding a book that you love, talking to your English teacher about the test that you're planning to take and what books you should read to actually have fun. They're going to say just read a book that you love, and that's going to help you learn. So that's what I would tell students to do.
We have a question in the chat. I could take this one. The question is, how many times should a student take the SATs and when in the process should they begin using Sharp? For the first part of your question about how many times a student should take it, I would say most students I've seen on average take the SAT 2 to 3 times. And I typically don't recommend that students take it more than 3 times. And the reason is that there are definitely diminishing returns after that third test. It's possible that taking it a fourth time could help. But, I would say it is often better for students to spend that time and energy beyond the third test on another part of the college process or school. Um, and then when in the process should they begin using Sharp? I think it's really helpful for students to start using Sharp as early in the process as possible. Sharp helps students to build out a clear study plan for what they need to do based on where they're at right now and the score they're targeting and how much time they have. And so really Sharp can be used starting really early on in the process for preparing for the SAT. We love having sophomores use it, juniors as well, but Sharp can be used early and often for preparing.
Kim, I'd really agree. 3 sounds perfect as the max because we've also worked with students who sometimes life doesn't work out the way we all wanted, as we are all probably aware. Sometimes they are taking the SAT in August of the senior year. Um, and if that's happening, fine, we make it work. But as college consultants, me and Jackie on the other end, that is stressful when you've also, if you're applying to 8, 10 schools, you could have 20, 25 supplemental essays that you're working on writing for each of those schools. Why do you want to go to this school? What is your favorite? If you were an ice cream flavor, what flavor would you be? That's the University of Vermont, where I live. You're writing those essays. That's a lot going on top of your regular senior year class load. So that really keeps you super busy. So the earlier that you can feel confident in a score, the better. One question, Kim, too, that I often get asked is like, is there too early? Right? Like, can students take the test too early and be done? What happens if that happens?
Is there a time when it is too early to take the test? I would say it is too early if it's before Algebra 2. It is very rare that students will get their best score if they try to take the test before completing Algebra 2. So I would say it is possible to take the test too early in that sense. Um, and I would say typically the one other thing I have heard um, that impacts like PSAT, National Merit Scholarship
Yes.
qualification is I think the earliest they consider a confirming SAT score for that is sophomore fall. So I would not recommend that anyone take the SAT officially and hope to be done with it prior to sophomore fall. And even then, I think there are a few colleges who prefer to see a test from uh, the summer after sophomore year or later to ensure that it is relatively current. I think Carnegie Mellon I've seen is one of the schools that really cares about that. I haven't really heard of many other schools who care about the recency, but I would say sort of like mid sophomore year and later is sort of the earliest I would really recommend taking the SAT.
Definitely agree on that. And we have some insider information from the college prep world that students have submitted a sophomore year SAT prep and been accepted, or SAT score and been accepted to Carnegie Mellon. It wasn't too early. But and, I
Interesting.
mean, I guess it makes sense. They don't want the score to be like 3 years old, but that is generally not something to worry about. If you're hitting like winter of sophomore year, you're in a solid place. And something else that I really recommend you might want to look up if you're a parent here in the United States is we have the National Merit. Oh God, what are all the acronyms? Qualifying QT.
NMSQT,
Yep.
so National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test.
I feel like
Say
there's
that 5 times fast.
there's a lot of acronyms in there. And that is something that is based on a student's PSAT score. So we'll talk about PSAT in a sec. Actually, Kim, I'll ask that question.
Absolutely.
Um, but students have to take that their junior year. So, there's a whole piece here. So do you want to mention a little bit about how are PSAT scores, which students are often required to take in school, how does that compare to what they can expect on their SAT?
That's a really good question, Maggie. So PSATs are scored out of 1520 instead of 1600. Why? I think it's sort of an archaic holdout, but they're out of 1520 I would say the PSAT is very similar in form to the SAT. So students will often do similarly to how they do on the PSAT to the actual SAT. Of course, there's like, plus or minus, let's say 20 to 40 points. But it's pretty accurate, I would say, in terms of predicting how a student might do on the SAT.
And we have a great question in the chat, two questions. One is sort of the score range for Ivy League schools. This is such an interesting and difficult question. Students are probably, it depends, if you're a recruited athlete and you are the best hockey player who's going to play hockey at the Olympics, like some of my former classmates, one of my Dartmouth 16 classmates is on the Canada team, go Laura Stacy. But if you are not, you are shooting for 1400 or above minimum. Dartmouth actually came out with some research. It's super interesting. Email me if you want to see it. That they are looking for your score in relation to your school as well. There's all kinds of contexts that schools are looking at. Dartmouth is really good with this. If you are earning a 1400 on the SAT and the average score at your school is a 950, that is standing out to Dartmouth because you are clearly performing well and above what other students in who are going to the same class as you are doing. And you just might not have the same opportunities for SAT prep, etc. But if you look at the average ranges, they are super high. Something that we are very interested in the college consulting world is schools were test optional during COVID times when you couldn't take a test and things were crazy. So some of those scores are inflated a little bit and kind of have a little bit of a hangover of, I'm only going to send this score in if it's really good. You should be shooting for the best score that your student can earn, and we can kind of talk based on individual circumstances about, okay, is it worth it for you to keep studying for this SAT, or does it make more sense to do an internship, right? Or take a class that's an elective that you're really interested in. It's all really trade-offs in this process, and that's like what a college counselor can provide guidance for. And the second part of this question, Kim, and obviously you're going to say it depends, but also what is the average prep time for it, like a 10th grader, right? Someone who's at the very beginning, how should they think about, this is going to take me 2 months or this is going to take me 3 years?
Yeah, I would say hopefully not 3 years, because that feels
Good
like quite a
answer.
lot of time, especially if you're starting in 10th grade. But
Yep.
I would say probably on the order of three to 5 months, maybe. It really depends on the student, where they're starting, what they're targeting, how much time they're preparing each day. Um, but yeah, I would say it like like my favorite answer, it depends on the student, but I would say roughly, let's say three to 5 months. But I would say more like 3 months is what I would assume as a ballpark. And if they're preparing over the summer and don't have a ton of other things going on, that could be quicker, right? But it really depends, I would say, on how much they're studying at a time.
And every student is different, but like my dream time is the summer before junior year for students because you can really lock in, as the kids say, and focus and really help your score get up there before you get into the craziness of junior year. But also summer before senior year also works for some students, depending on what your course load looks like. There are all kinds of blocks of time to focus, and that is something that we can help you think about. We have a really good question specifically for an engineering student, but I think our answer is the same, right, Kim? Of like ACT versus SAT. What does that look like?
Yeah, I think I would say it depends essentially on which tests your student does better on. And so whenever any parent asks me about ACT versus SAT, my guidance is typically have them take a practice test of both. If they've already taken the PSAT, that's a pretty good baseline for how they would do on the SAT. But take a practice test on each. There are tons of free tools online for comparing an ACT score, which is out of 36, to an SAT score, which is out of 1600. So you can get a sense of roughly like where they fall. And then I would say if they show a real difference or strength in one test over the other, I would pick that test and pursue it and focus there. I will say the ACT has gone through a lot of changes recently with the enhanced ACT. And so if they are doing pretty similarly, all things considered, I often will recommend that people take the SAT just because um, there are more resources and tutors are more familiar with the current state of the SAT just because it's been a little bit more static in recent years. But in general, take a practice test of both, see how they do, and then try to focus on one of those tests.
I agree with that. That's great advice. We have a question about how does being a national merit finalist potentially impact your chances of admission? There are scholarships available for national merit finalists if you are able to earn that distinction, which is really wonderful. Could that potentially hurt or harm you? Kim, I don't know if you want to jump in or I can also jump in for that one.
If you want to jump in, I think that would be great.
Yeah, I'm feeling like so this can be tricky because I think there's a lot out there about what can and can't hurt your admissions chances. And the honest answer for admissions is that it's really hard to know because it is a black box and we can't fully know everything about how and why people get in. Being a national merit finalist is not something that's necessarily going to hurt your score or chances of getting in at all because even if they don't offer scholarships, they are seeing that you are a really, really hardworking, thoughtful, and smart student who performed well on your SATs, and that stands out to them. So it is not like, oh, this person's going to go somewhere else because they have a scholarship. That fits into something called demonstrated interest and fit for the school. If you've visited the school that you're interested in, if you have attended webinars that they've offered, and then you write a really great, why do you want to go to this school, supplemental essay, then they're like, oh, this student is really interested here. I think those like rumors can happen when students like don't get into a school for another reason and are kind of grasping at straws for, oh, why didn't I get in? So if you're interested in this topic, we are doing a free webinar with New York Times bestselling author Jeff Salingo, which we are fangirling a little bit about because he is seriously just an amazing resource and expert in higher education. And I can't believe he's going to be joining families for free. It will be a full question and answer session. That is on March 1st, so in a couple weeks. We love our Sunday night webinars. So we would love to see you there and talk more about any of these questions. Um, and yeah, that's that. We have a good question too. So if you are an international applicant, so we have a Canadian applicant, and I'm actually going to use this to talk about the SAT, I think, because all of this is in context for schools to look at each application. They know where you're coming from, what your school is like. They have resources. It's called a school profile that they get about your school. And if there's multiple students from your school who have applied in past years, they learn about these schools. That is their job as admissions counselors. And I think one of the things about the SAT, and as grade inflation has increased, we are seeing that the SAT is more and more important because it is an outside measure of academic readiness for college. And they probably won't say it on a hot mic, but admissions officers are saying that it's really important for them to see either AP scores, SAT scores, ACT scores to kind of have this more objective measure of a student's readiness for college because too many kids have a 4.0 GPA and get all A's. As a high school teacher, I know that it's a super complicated world out there for grade inflation, for grades, for working on really hard courses, but your ability to perform well on a test like the SAT, I mean, no one ever says this, but what Scholastic Aptitude Test is what it stands for, right? Like they are seeing that you are ready for college, and a score on this test or the ACT or an AP test helps colleges know and correlates based on research with your ability to succeed at colleges. So they will use that information to understand where you're coming from and whether you're likely to be successful. All right. Okay. I hope that you found this helpful. We are at 8:45 here on the East Coast, so I am so grateful to everyone who joined. And I know we had a bunch who were planning on watching the recording, so hello to you too, if you're watching this afterwards. It was so good to see everybody, and we will be sending a follow-up email with this recording, with some links that are on the screen so that you can get these if you need them. And we are happy to answer more questions if you have them. We hope to hear from you. Hopefully you can tell from both Kim and I, we really love this stuff. We geek out on this stuff, and we also just really like helping kids. So thank you so much. All right, everybody, have a great night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a good night.